It's a Sun Media exclusive story this morning. Lane Morris, Tabitha Spear, and her two kids filed a $42.5 million lawsuit against Omar Khadr. It's about fighting for the truth and making sure Khadr doesn't get rich off of murder. Joining us now with the details of the suit are the victims' lawyers, Laura Tanner and Don Winder. Hello and welcome to the program from Salt Lake City. First of all, why have you filed this lawsuit for the victims?
We filed it because Lane asked us to, but we filed it because of principles of personal responsibility and accountability. And we think that while Omar Khadr is serving time to pay his debt to society, he needs to recognize his debt to the children and widow of Sergeant Spear and for what he did with Sergeant Morris in terms of taking out his eye.
Can you explain for our viewers the difference between the criminal or military justice penalty that Khadr is serving versus the civil suit that you're bringing? I think a lot of our viewers understand. You made it somewhat clear there, but how is the procedure difference? How will this unfold? You filed the suit in Utah. What would the next step be?
So in terms of the difference between responsibilities, as I've said, Omar is paying his debt to society by serving time in prison. He has not recognized his debt to the victims of his acts. That's why we're bringing a civil suit. It's like what happened in O.J. Simpson's trial. He did be found not guilty of murder, but civilly he was sued and his assets were attached for what he did.
Now, how will this trial proceed? Because right now Khadr is in jail in Canada, so I presume he wouldn't come down to Utah to be a witness in his own trial, or would he? Will this trial proceed without him? What do you think the likely unfolding of events will be?
Well, I think the most significant thing, and I'll turn to Ms. Tanner about that, is the way we've crafted the complaint based upon his own words. Laura?
Right. The way we crafted the complaint in this instance is unique in a couple of regards. Number one is that we actually get some insight into how a terrorist thinks and feels and acts. And the second most important part of the complaint is we used Khadr's own words as he testified before a military tribunal when he pled guilty to the murder of Sergeant Spear and the maiming of Sergeant Morris. So that's basically how the complaint was crafted. We don't know whether Khadr will show up to be a witness at the civil trial. That remains to be seen, but we will proceed whether he shows up or not.
Now, it would not.
Go ahead. The distinction here is between usually when a complaint is filed, it's allegations of one party. And the other party can file an answer, set forth its version of what happened, and then you're headed down towards a resolution by a judge or jury as to where the truth is. We've taken Khadr's own words from the stipulations in the military tribunal, from his testimony when he pled guilty, and set those forth. So I don't see that there's anywhere for him to go should he choose to answer, because it's based upon his own admissions.
Now, I understand from reading the complaint that it is a jury trial. Would this be a jury of people in Salt Lake City? How many people would sit on the jury? And I would imagine, having read the complaint and knowing the confession, that the jury will return with a verdict. I mean, I can't imagine they wouldn't. How long would that process be? And I'm curious, how many people would sit on such a jury?
It would be 12 people in federal court in Salt Lake City if it went that far. If it goes that far, it'll be 18 to 24 months likely. But I don't see it going that far because we based the complaint upon his own admissions. And I don't see that there's anywhere he can go to deny it and set up the necessary denials to require a trial.
So you think it could be a summary judgment? That's what we might call it in Canadian law, if the facts are so
exactly the same here.
Okay. Well, now let's say you get a judgment against Khadr for $42.5 million. Now, obviously, he's a penniless jailbird now, but I know that he has filed a lawsuit against the Canadian government for $20 million. And I understand from my friends in the government that they're actually contemplating it, paying him a settlement, which I find disgraceful and disheartening. God forbid, let's say some liberal judge or some politically correct bureaucrat authorizes a settlement to Khadr, the convicted, confessed terrorist, of, let's just say, $10 million. I hate to even say those words, but I think it's possible. Would you be able to seize those funds if you had a verdict in your civil suit in Utah? Would you be able to attach any monies paid to Khadr and take it away from him?
Well, we hope so, and that's one of the reasons that we're filing the suit. But Ms. Tanner should also talk about what he agreed to in terms of the military tribunal.
Okay, Ms. Tanner, what does that mean? How's that relevant?
Well, as part of his guilty plea with the military tribunal, he agreed to turn over any proceeds that he received as a result of his terrorist acts to the U.S. government. Now, the definition in the pleadings is quite broad, and we don't know whether it applies to any payments by the Canadian government, but we would certainly do whatever we needed to do to seize the assets and make sure they were distributed to the family of Sergeant Speer and Lane Morris and his family, because that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, now I know the lawsuit that Khadr has filed against the Canadian government isn't about his terrorist acts, it's about his alleged mistreatment in Guantanamo Bay and the Canadian government's complicity with it. So I don't know if that would be covered by his agreement with the U.S. Military Commission. If someone has a judgment against you in Utah, can that be filed in jurisdictions in Canada and executed? I'm sure it can be. I mean, we have reciprocal agreements, so you can't flee your debts. Have you looked at the law in this case?
We have, and specifically your act allowing Canadian citizens who were injured by terrorism to sue provides for the enforcement of foreign judgments that are rendered under similar statutes.
Well, this is fascinating. I'm hopeful. I think the most important part of your lawsuit is the symbolism, to remind people that there really were victims, and Omar Khadr wasn't one of them. But if you could take any loot that this terrorist would enjoy from the Canadian government, that would be a moral victory as well as a financial one for a family left without a father and another soldier left blind in one eye. I want to thank you too. Last question, if people want to see the actual document of the lawsuit itself, I guess I could put it up on my website, EzraLevant.com. Do you have any other advice for people who want to learn more about this lawsuit?
In terms of it's being filed, it is filed now. It was just filed moments ago before we came on the show. I would commend you to put it up. We could send you other pleadings as things might transpire, so you could put it on your website.
That's a deal. Send us any more documents that come up, and I'll put them on my website, EzraLevant.com, for people to look at. Listen, Mr. Winder, Ms. Tanner, thank you very much for your courage and your legal efforts, and hopefully they'll be successful. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much.